Welcome to Global Power Analysis. In my last video, I broke down how the United States captured Venezuela's president. At the end, I told you Cuba might be next. Trump has been hinting at it. And today, we're going to examine exactly what an invasion of Cuba would look like, what it would mean economically, and why this matters more than you think. Cuba is 90 miles from Florida. That's closer than Los Angeles is to San Diego. You could literally see Cuba from Key West on a clear day. This proximity has made it a strategic flashpoint for over a century. And right now, the pieces are moving into position for something big. Let's start with the military reality. Cuba's armed forces number around 45,000 active troops. Cuba ranks 67th globally in military power. The U.S. ranks first, but numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Cuba's military operates with equipment largely from the 1970s and 80s. Soviet-era tanks, aging MiG fighters, and air defense systems that have been upgraded with help from Belarus, but still can't match modern U.S. technology. Cuba has no functioning submarines. Their navy focuses entirely on coastal defense with a handful of patrol boats. The Air Force has perhaps 24 operational combat aircraft. Now here's the part that makes an invasion almost absurdly easy from a military perspective. The United States already has a military base inside Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. It's been there since 1903. Under a lease agreement, the U.S. pays Cuba $4,085 per year in rent. Cuba has refused to cash those checks since 1959, calling the lease illegal. But the terms are clear. The lease continues unless both nations agree to end it, or the U.S. abandons the base. Neither is happening. This means U.S. forces could launch an invasion from within Cuban territory. No need for a massive amphibious assault. The infrastructure is already there. Military analysts estimate that the U.S. could defeat Cuba's conventional forces in 72 hours. Air superiority would be established immediately. The Cuban Air Force would be neutralized within hours. Ground forces could move from Guantanamo and secure key installations rapidly. But here's where it gets complicated. Urban warfare is a different beast. If Cuban forces retreat into Havana and other cities, you're looking at prolonged street-to-street fighting. Iraq taught us that lesson. Taking a country militarily and actually controlling it are two different things. Now let's talk about what's really at stake here, beyond just military conquest. Cuba has strategic resources that matter in today's economy. The island has significant nickel deposits. Nickel is critical for electric vehicle batteries and stainless steel production. Cuba also has cobalt reserves, another battery component. But the real economic prize is location and potential. Cuba, if opened up, would become one of the hottest tourist destinations in the Western Hemisphere overnight. It's 90 miles from the United States. No expensive flights to Europe or Asia. Pre-revolution Havana was the playground of wealthy Americans. It had world-class casinos, hotels, and beaches. All of that infrastructure still exists, just decayed from decades of isolation. Real estate investors are already salivating at the possibility. We're talking about billions in potential claims. But there's a darker side to this economic calculation. If the U.S. invades Cuba, you're looking at a massive refugee crisis. Cuba has a population of over 11 million people. Even if just 10 to 20% flee to Florida, that's 1 to 2 million refugees in a matter of weeks. Florida's total population is 22 million. Imagine adding nearly 10% to that overnight. Housing prices would spike. Social services would be overwhelmed. This is actually one of the reasons past U.S. presidents avoided military action. The humanitarian and economic fallout would be enormous. Now here's where the geopolitics get really interesting. Cuba isn't just Cuba anymore, it's become a pawn in great power competition. China has been operating spy facilities in Cuba since at least 2019. U.S. intelligence confirmed this in 2023. These facilities allow China to intercept electronic communications across the southeastern United States. Florida alone has Cape Canaveral Space Launch Complex, U.S. Southern Command Headquarters, Central Command Headquarters, and multiple naval bases. China can monitor all of it from Cuba. If the U.S. invades Cuba, China loses that intelligence gold mine. Beijing has invested billions in Cuba's crumbling economy. A U.S. takeover would cut off Chinese influence 90 miles from American shores. Similarly, Russia has historical ties to Cuba dating back to the Cold War. Russia doesn't have the resources to intervene militarily. They're stretched thin in Ukraine. But expect diplomatic condemnation and potential retaliatory moves in other regions. This is the new Cold War playing out in the Caribbean. Venezuela falls to the U.S., Cuba potentially next. The question becomes, where does it stop? Trump has hinted at Nicaragua being in a similar situation. If the U.S. reshapes all of Latin America by force or pressure, we're looking at a modern Monroe Doctrine on steroids. The original Monroe Doctrine from 1823 declared the Western Hemisphere off-limits to European colonization. This new version would be about pushing out Chinese and Russian influence entirely. For investors, there are clear plays here. Defense contractors will benefit in the short term. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon see stock increases during military operations. Tourism and hospitality companies with Caribbean exposure could position for a post-invasion boom. Real estate investment trusts focused on emerging markets might move into Cuba if it opens. But there are risks too. A prolonged occupation or urban insurgency would drain resources. Refugee management costs would be enormous. International backlash could lead to sanctions or trade complications with allies who oppose the invasion. The signs to watch for are simple: naval movements near Cuba, increased rhetoric from the White House about Cuban human rights or terrorism, congressional authorizations for military force, intelligence leaks about imminent threats. These are the markers that precede action. But here's what I haven't told you yet. There's a third country that Trump's team has been quietly discussing. I mentioned Nicaragua briefly, but there's more to that story than you realize. Nicaragua has become a Chinese and Russian stronghold in Central America. It controls a potential canal route that could rival Panama. And if Venezuela and Cuba fall, Nicaragua becomes the next domino. In my next video, I'm breaking down Nicaragua's strategic importance, why China is investing billions there, and what happens if the U.S. decides to complete the trilogy. This is building to something much bigger than individual countries. This is about control of an entire hemisphere. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. The geopolitical chessboard is moving faster than most people realize. Drop a comment below. Do you think the U.S. will actually invade Cuba? Or is this all posturing? I'll see you in 48 hours for the Nicaragua breakdown. This is Global Power Analysis, and we're just getting started.